Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear isn't just another prison story. It's the night Rikers Island went silent before it screamed. The storm that night wasn't on the weather forecast. It began behind concrete walls, in a place that already felt like the world's end, Rikers Island. The year was 2012. The air inside the North Infirmary Command was thick with tension, a pressure so heavy even the guards could feel it pressing on their ribs. By 11:37 p.m., most inmates were locked down. The fluorescent lights flickered like dying stars over rows of steel doors. Inside cell 3B, 14 sat Marcus Slim Devon, 29 years old, serving time for armed robbery, but known for something far darker. He once claimed he'd rather die standing than live in chains. That night, Slim wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. 2 cells down, a rookie correctional officer named Daniel Ruiz made his rounds, just 3 months into the job. His radio crackled with static as he walked past the row, unaware that behind those steel doors, something was already in motion. A whisper passed from cell to cell. A coded message. No shouting, no banging, just a rhythm of taps, 3 short, 2 long. The kind of communication inmates used when planning something they couldn't risk being heard. By 11:52 p.m., Ruiz noticed something strange. The hallway cameras were off. Not glitched off. The monitor inside the control booth showed only black screens, every feed dead at once. He radioed the watch commander, but no one answered. The silence was louder than the rain slamming the roof. Then came the first sound, a scream from the lower tier. Not the usual kind. This one had panic in it. Ruiz sprinted down, flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on a cell door that shouldn't have been open. It was cell 3B09, and it swung slightly as if inviting him inside. He hesitated. Inmate inside 3B09, show yourself. No response. When he stepped closer, his boots slid on something wet. He aimed the flashlight downward and froze. The floor was slick, streaked with dark red trails that led toward the back of the cell. Blood. The radio came alive suddenly. A frantic voice from another block. Unit Bravo, do you copy? The gates are jammed. I repeat, we're on lockdown failure. Ruiz's pulse slammed his chest. He turned toward the corridor, but then a sound echoed behind him. A low metallic click. He spun around, but before he could speak, he saw it, scratched into the wall above the bunk, written in smeared red. The cells will bleed tonight. And as the emergency alarms began wailing across the facility, Ruiz realized something terrifying. This wasn't an accident. It was the start of something planned, something massive. The siren screamed through Rikers like an animal in pain. Red lights pulsed across the walls, painting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Officer Ruiz stumbled backward from cell 3B09, his heart pounding hard enough to drown out the noise. Inmates were shouting now, metal banging, boots stomping, fists slamming against steel. The entire block had awakened. But this wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. It was coordinated. Every noise had rhythm. Every move had purpose. From the command tower above, the intercom crackled to life. This is Warden Keller. All units, contain your sectors immediately. Do not open additional gates without authorization. But his voice, usually steady, carried something else tonight. Fear. Warden James Keller had run Rikers for 15 years. A man of iron reputation, known for breaking riots before they began. But what no one knew, not his guards, not the state, not even the press, was that Keller had been hiding something inside Rikers' walls for over a decade. And tonight, that secret was coming back for him. In the administrative wing, a control officer named Cheryl Mendez fought to bring the cameras back online. The feeds flickered one by one, revealing scenes that made her blood run cold. Block C, doors open. Block D, lights out. And in Block B, something impossible. Inmates moving in formation, carrying tools that should have been locked in the maintenance cage. How the hell did they get those? She whispered. Then she saw something worse. A camera feed that wasn't supposed to exist. A hidden channel labeled B-Sub Basement. It wasn't part of any official blueprint. She clicked it. The screen showed a narrow, unmarked corridor deep below the facility, one she'd never seen before. And at the end of it, a heavy steel door was open, light spilling from inside. Mendez grabbed her radio. "Warden Keller, we've got a breach in a sublevel that's not in the system. Who authorized?" But the line went dead. Meanwhile, back in Block 3B, Officer Ruiz was trapped. The riot had spread faster than any response team could react. He ducked behind a barricade, gripping his baton like a weapon, but his mind wasn't on survival. It was on what he'd seen on the wall. The cells will bleed tonight. Was it a threat? A warning? Or a message to someone inside the system? Through the smoke and noise, he spotted Slim Devon, calm, almost serene, standing in the middle of the chaos. While everyone else was screaming, Slim just stared toward the ceiling cameras, like he was waiting for someone to see him. Then Ruiz noticed something glinting in Slim's hand. A small brass key with an engraving. K-17. "What is that?" Ruiz shouted over the noise. Slim smiled faintly. "Freedom," he said, "but not the kind you think." Before Ruiz could respond, the explosion hit, a deafening blast that shook the entire cell block and plunged it into total darkness. Somewhere in the confusion, a voice came over the emergency PA system. It wasn't the warden. It wasn't any officer. It was a recorded message, distorted, grainy, decades old. "If you're hearing this, the experiment has failed. Do not open the lower cells." The message repeated twice, then cut out. And as Ruiz crawled to his feet in the flickering dark, he saw it, faint, coming from the lower stairwell, a red light glowing beneath the floor. A light coming from the same secret subbasement Mendez had just discovered. The explosion left a crater of smoke and screams inside Rikers' North Wing. Alarms blared across the island, but the outside world had no idea what was happening behind those walls. Communications were jammed. The prison was on its own. Officer Ruiz stumbled through the wreckage, coughing, his flashlight flickering through dust and falling debris. The floor beneath his boots was cracked, scorched, and bleeding water from broken pipes. Somewhere down the hall, he could still hear Slim Devon's voice echoing, calm, deliberate, like a man following a script he'd memorized long ago. "You can't cage a secret forever," Slim whispered, before disappearing into the smoke. Meanwhile, in the surveillance control room, Cheryl Mendez stared at the hidden feed labeled B sub-basement. The camera angle had changed. Now, instead of an empty hallway, there were figures. 3 of them, moving like shadows, wearing stolen correctional uniforms. Each carried something wrapped in cloth. Mendez zoomed in. The shapes inside the cloth looked like medical canisters. Her stomach dropped. No, that's impossible. She knew that corridor. It wasn't supposed to exist, but she remembered rumors from her early days at Rikers, whispers about a forgotten experiment back in the late 1990s. The Department of Corrections had allegedly allowed a private contractor to use inmates for behavioral conditioning trials. When one of those tests turned deadly, the entire project was shut down and buried, literally, under a new block of cells. But if that was true, then someone had just opened it again. Ruiz finally reached the lower stairwell, his radio hissing with static. Each step downward felt like a descent into something older than the prison itself. The deeper he went, the colder it got, and the more the walls changed. The concrete was rough, unfinished, marked with faded biohazard warnings. He reached the bottom, where a rusted metal door hung halfway open. On the other side was the source of the red light, a narrow hallway lined with abandoned cells. The smell of rust and bleach hit him like a wall. Inside one of the cells, he saw a number etched into the wall, E17. Below it, scratched in desperate handwriting, "We never left." He raised his flashlight and saw movement. Someone was inside the last cell. Ruiz stepped closer, heart pounding. "This is Officer Ruiz. Identify yourself." The figure moved into view, gaunt, pale, dressed in tattered inmate clothes. But it wasn't a current prisoner. The ID tag on their chest read Test Subject 14. The man's voice was barely a whisper. They said it was rehabilitation, but it was control. Before Ruiz could respond, The man pointed to the far wall. He brought it back. Who did? The inmate's eyes darted upward toward the ceiling. The one who promised freedom. The one you call Warden. Then the lights cut out completely. Upstairs, chaos spread to the outer wings. Inmates poured through breached gates. Guards fought to hold lines. In the control room's main monitor suddenly displayed one single line of text. Phase 2 commence. Mendez felt her blood freeze. Someone wasn't just orchestrating a riot. They were following a plan that had been in motion for years. In the sub-basement, Ruiz's radio came back to life for just a second. A voice whispered through the static. It wasn't Mendez or Keller or any officer. It was Slim Devon. Welcome to the real Rikers, officer. You wanted the truth. Follow the blood. And as Ruiz turned his flashlight toward the floor, he realized the red light wasn't coming from wiring or emergency lamps. It was coming from beneath the concrete, seeping through the cracks like liquid fire. Rikers Island was burning from the inside out. Smoke rolled through the corridors like storm clouds. Alarms screamed in red pulses, and chaos had turned the prison into a living nightmare. The skyline of New York glittered just across the river, so close yet impossibly far, a reminder that the rest of the city had no idea what was unfolding behind those walls. Officer Daniel Ruiz gripped his flashlight with trembling hands as he stood in the sub-basement hallway. The air was thick with damp and iron, the scent of blood mixed with rust. The red glow beneath the cracked floor flickered like veins pulsing through the concrete. He crouched, running his fingers along one of the fissures. It wasn't paint. It wasn't a light. It was fluid, fresh, dark warm. He recoiled, heart hammering. This can't be real. But it was. Behind him, the half-dead inmate, test subject 14, slumped against the bars, mumbling in broken sentences. They said they'd make us calm. No anger, no fear, just obedience. But the injections changed us. Ruiz turned sharply. Who's they? Who ordered this? The man's eyes widened, bloodshot and empty. Keller. He made us forget. But he couldn't bury everything. Then his voice broke into a wet cough, and the moment Ruiz reached for him, the man collapsed, lifeless. Upstairs, Warden James Keller was pacing through his office, drenched in sweat. The riot alarms howled in the background, but he didn't reach for the phone, didn't call for backup. Instead, he opened a hidden drawer in his desk and pulled out a black binder marked Project Reclamation. Inside were old photos, medical tables, syringes, inmates strapped down, their eyes wide in terror. A government letterhead with faded ink read, Approved for Behavioral Correctional Study, 1998, Confidential. A knock at the door broke his trance. Mendez burst in, her face pale. Sir, the sub-basement, it's active. I've seen people down there, prisoners who shouldn't even exist. Keller slammed the binder shut. You saw nothing. Do you understand me? With respect, Warden, she snapped. Something's happening down there that's not in any report. And I think Devon. He cut her off with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Devon is doing exactly what I allowed him to do. Mendez froze. You allowed this? Keller leaned closer, voice low and cold. Sometimes to maintain control, you need to let the system tear itself apart, so you can rebuild it stronger. Those men down there were part of a program to suppress violent behavior. But the compound, it evolved. It bonded with them. The riot was inevitable. You're insane, she whispered. No, Keller said. I'm realistic. Rikers was dying long before tonight. What happens here will save it, or bury it forever. He pressed a button beneath his desk. Somewhere below, a mechanical hum rumbled through the structure, a sound that made the very floors tremble. Back underground, Ruiz heard that same vibration, like machinery waking from a long sleep. The ground beneath him shifted slightly, dust falling from the ceiling. The air turned colder, sharper, as faint gas seeped through the vents. From deeper within the hallway came a metallic clatter, followed by footsteps. Ruiz raised his baton, but what stepped into the light wasn't another officer. It was Slim Devon. His prison uniform was streaked with grime, his eyes wild with purpose. And in his hand, He held a control key card. Marked admin access, Keller. Guess he didn't tell you the truth, huh? Slim said, stepping closer. You think we started this riot? We didn't. Keller did. He's been experimenting on us for years, trying to find out how much pain a man can take before he breaks. Ruiz's throat tightened. You expect me to believe the warden. Belief doesn't matter, Slim cut in. What matters is the evidence. It's in a lab down here. The files, the samples, everything he's done. And I'm going to make sure the world sees it. Ruiz hesitated. You're planning to expose him? Slim's smile was thin, dangerous. Expose him? No. End him. Before Ruiz could respond, another explosion rocked the facility above them. The ceiling cracked, sending concrete dust raining down. Sirens wailed again, but this time, Ruiz realized they weren't alarms. They were evacuation signals. Mendez's voice suddenly broke through the radio, distorted but urgent. Ruiz, the warden's activating a lockdown protocol. He's sealing the lower levels. Get out of there now. Ruiz looked toward the stairwell. Slim didn't move. You go, he said. I'll finish what I started. But before Ruiz could take a step, the red glow beneath the floor surged brighter, flooding the corridor in light. The cracks widened with a loud snap, and from within them came a sound, a deep, resonant groan, like the prison itself was alive and breathing. Slim turned slowly toward it. Looks like his secret's waking up. Far above, Warden Keller stood by his window as the power grid flickered. The skyline across the river was still silent. He whispered to himself, almost reverently, "Forgive me. The experiment must complete." And as he flipped the final switch, sealing off the basement completely, every lock in Rikers Island slammed shut with a sound that echoed like a gunshot across the island. Ruiz and Slim were trapped below, and whatever was buried beneath them was no longer asleep. The entire island trembled like it was alive. Dust fell from the ceilings, pipes hissed with steam, and deep below the surface, the sub-basement's red glow pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves. The sound wasn't mechanical anymore. It was organic, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the steel bones of Rikers. Officer Daniel Ruiz pressed himself against the wall, gasping for air. The smoke was thicker now, laced with something chemical. His flashlight beam caught fragments of metal, broken restraints, surgical tables, and scattered medical files coated in dust. The labels read, Project Reclamation, Phase 2, Behavioral Neural Conditioning. And at the bottom of one of those files was a signature he recognized instantly. Warden James Keller. Ruiz clenched his fist, rage burning beneath the fear. The truth was laid out right in front of him. The riot, the secrecy, the horror. It all pointed to the man in charge. From the far side of the room, Slim Devon stepped into the light, dragging a metal briefcase. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with soot, but his expression was steady, determined. This, Slim said, dropping the case onto a table with a clang, is everything he tried to bury. Files, serum samples, test logs. Proof of what they did to us. Ruiz glanced down at the case. Inside were syringes filled with a strange, dark red fluid, the same color as the substance seeping from the cracks below. What is it? Slim's voice lowered. They called it a suppressant. Said it would reduce violent tendencies. But it didn't suppress anything, it rewired it. Made rage permanent. Made obedience impossible. He looked up, eyes burning. They created monsters out of man, and now the monsters are coming home. Upstairs, Mendez ran through the smoke-filled hallways toward the warden's office. The building groaned as the lockdown doors sealed one by one. She slammed her shoulder against Keller's office door until it burst open. Keller stood at his desk, the lights flickering behind him, watching multiple monitors showing the chaos below. His expression was blank, almost serene. You knew this would happen, Mendez said, panting. You wanted this. Keller didn't turn around. Do you know what Rikers truly is, Officer Mendez? It's not a prison. It's a laboratory of human behavior, a microcosm of power, fear, and control. I simply accelerated the process. She took a step forward. You turned people into experiments. They were already experiments, Keller replied coldly. Society discarded them. I just repurposed them. Mendez stared at him in disbelief. You've lost your mind. No, Keller said softly, finally turning to face her. I've found purpose. This chaos will prove that humanity can't be rehabilitated, only contained. He tapped a button on his console. Somewhere below, the sound of heavy machinery roared to life. Back in the subbasement, Ruiz felt the vibration first, a deep mechanical hum rising through the ground. The red glow brightened into an almost blinding crimson. Slim's eyes widened. He's purging the lower levels, Slim said. He's going to burn it all. The files, the evidence, us. Ruiz looked around frantically. There has to be another way out. Slim grinned darkly. There is, but we'll have to go through him. He lifted the briefcase and started toward the stairwell. Ruiz followed, the two men climbing up through the smoke and sirens toward the administrative wing. The corridors were chaos, flames licking at the walls, alarms blaring, unconscious guards sprawled across the floor. Ruiz's lungs burned, but he pushed on. Somewhere above, Keller's voice echoed through the PA system. This is Warden Keller. The facility is under quarantine. All lower-level personnel are to remain in lockdown. No one leaves until the protocol is complete. Slim laughed bitterly. That's his way of saying everyone dies here. They reached the final stairwell leading to the warden's office. The door at the top was sealed with a biometric lock. Ruiz tried the handle. Nothing. Then Slim stepped forward, swiped the admin access card across the reader, and the door hissed open. Inside, Keller was waiting. Calm, composed. A pistol on his desk, the monitors behind him still glowing red. Well, Keller said, almost amused, the prodigal son returns. Slim stared at him, fury burning behind his calm exterior. You destroyed lives, Keller. You tortured us. And for what? A scientific paper? Keller's expression didn't change. For understanding. For control. Ruiz stepped forward. Control? You lost control hours ago. Keller turned toward Ruiz, smiling faintly. Did I? He pressed a final switch on his console. Outside the office window, massive containment doors began closing over the entire facility. The riot, the chaos, the rebellion, all part of the data, even your reactions. Everything is being recorded. Slim's patience snapped. He slammed the briefcase onto the desk, scattering papers and vials. Then record this. He opened the case, pulled out one of the red-filled syringes, and held it up. This is what you use to control us, right? Let's see how it feels. Before Keller could react, Slim jabbed the needle into his own arm and pressed the plunger. His body jolted violently, muscles locking, veins glowing faintly under his skin. Ruiz shouted, Slim, no, but it was too late. Slim turned toward the warden, eyes blazing. Now you'll see what your creation becomes when it's not caged. He lunged. The room erupted in chaos, gunfire, glass shattering, alarms wailing louder than ever. Keller fired once, twice, but Slim kept coming unstoppable, driven by fury and pain. The two men crashed into the control panel, sparks flying as the systems overloaded. Mendez burst through the door just as the power grid exploded, sending flames across the walls. When the smoke cleared, Ruiz was on the floor, coughing, trying to see through the haze. Keller lay slumped against the wall, motionless, blood pooling beneath him. But Slim was gone. Only the shattered briefcase remained, and the sound of heavy footsteps fading down the corridor. Mendez helped Ruiz to his feet. We need to get out before the whole place goes up. Ruiz nodded weakly, glancing back toward the flames. What about him? Mendez's eyes hardened. The warden's experiment just ended. But Ruiz wasn't so sure, because on one of the flickering monitors behind Keller's desk, amid the static, a single camera still worked. It showed Slim, walking through the burning corridors of Rikers, his veins glowing faint red under his skin. And beneath the feed, a new message flashed across the screen. By dawn, the skyline of New York was still cloaked in smoke. Helicopters circled above Rikers Island, their spotlights sweeping across what looked like a war zone. The prison was a ruin, flames still licking from collapsed cell blocks, alarms wailing faintly through the fog. The night the cells bled was over, but the island was far from silent. Officer Daniel Ruiz and Cheryl Mendez stood at the east gate, surrounded by first responders. Their uniforms were torn, faces blackened with soot, eyes hollow from what they had seen. Paramedics rushed past with stretchers carrying both inmates and officers, indistinguishable now in the chaos. Mendez broke the silence first. They said it's over. Ruiz shook his head slowly. No, it's not. She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Ruiz's gaze was fixed on the rising smoke from the administrative wing. Keller's dead, but whatever he started didn't die with him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal key, engraved with the same marking he'd seen on Slim's keycard. K-17. Mendez frowned. Where did you get that? Ruiz's voice was low. Slim dropped it before he disappeared. Later that morning, federal investigators flooded the site. They recovered Keller's black binder, fragments of medical vials, and encrypted data drives from the basement. But something crucial was missing. The body of Marcus Slim Devon was never found. The official report said he burned in the collapse. But Ruiz knew better. He'd seen the monitor. He'd seen Slim walking through the fire like it didn't hurt him at all, his veins pulsing red, his face calm, like the rage had replaced the man. That image haunted him every time he closed his eyes. A week later, Ruiz sat alone in an interrogation room at the Department of Corrections headquarters. Across from him sat a pair of federal agents, their badges glinting in the harsh light. Officer Ruiz, one of them said, "You were the last person to see Warden Keller alive. Can you confirm that the substance used in his experiments is no longer a threat?" Ruiz hesitated. He could lie. He could tell them the fire destroyed everything. But in his mind, he saw Slim's glowing eyes in that dark hallway, and the message that flashed on Keller's monitors before everything went dark. Phase 3. External deployment initiated. He leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think you understand. The threat isn't inside Rikers anymore." The room fell silent. The agents exchanged uneasy looks. "What are you saying, officer?" Ruiz stared straight ahead. "I'm saying it's already out there." 6 months later, a security camera in a Brooklyn subway tunnel caught something strange at 2:43 a.m. A man in a hoodie, limping, his face obscured. He stopped near a vending machine, rolled up his sleeve, and faint red light flickered under his skin. He looked up at the camera, smiled faintly, and whispered something before disappearing into the darkness. Audio technicians later enhanced the sound. 3 words were clear: "The cells bleed everywhere." If you want to uncover more hidden cases, secret experiments, and true prison horrors the world tried to forget, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't just watch the story, be part of the truth. Like, comment, and share this video if you believe stories like this deserve to be exposed. Because somewhere out there, another cell just opened and another secret is waiting to bleed.